Welcome to Electrified, it's your host, Dylan Loomis. If you like taking your Tesla to the track, you're in luck as one of the latest software updates has a new powertrain endurance option with settings standard, increased, and maximum. Previously with track mode, there would be great performance, but it was for short periods of time as some of the components would heat up and that degrades the performance. Now Tesla is giving customers the option to control how the thermal management works. Standard will leave the performance as it was before, and maximum is the highest cooling setting, so you may have slightly degraded performance, but you'll have that performance over a longer period of time. For now, this is only for vehicles with track mode version 3 with update 2024.38.4 and later, aka only the new 2024 Model 3 performance. The Model X doesn't even have track mode yet, but the word is they're working on it. The Model Y Performance and the Model S Plaid have not yet received this feature. You may remember back in February of this year, Drew Baglino said Sentry Mode power consumption needs improvement. The team is working to reduce by around 40% in a Q2 software update. As we now know, that deadline was missed. But it may be time to get your hopes up once again as Tesla rolled out a new software update aimed at significantly reducing Sentry Mode's energy consumption. However, for now, it's only for the Cybertruck and was only spotted on vehicles in Mexico. For what it's worth, this update was on software branch 2024.38.4, but the Model Y vehicles that have received this update do not have Sentry Mode improvements. Generally speaking, I would expect an improvement like this to trickle down to the rest of the fleet over time, so fingers crossed that happens in the weeks ahead. However, to keep expectations in check, there is a chance that the different architecture of the Cybertruck gives them a different workaround, and it may be a bit longer for them to figure it out for the rest of the fleet. I'm not sure if the significant energy consumption is because Sentry runs through the FSD computer that requires it to be on all the time. But I can tell you, when we evacuated for the hurricane, I was watching the Sentry Mode energy drain closely because I was expecting many of the superchargers on our way back to be down. And given that our car was in a parking garage, it would have been nice to have Sentry Mode on and not have to worry about how much battery it was going to use up. This would be such a welcome update for the entirety of the fleet, so hopefully this provides at least a bit of encouragement for now. Replying to Tesla Chan posting a video about Tesla's safety, Lars said safety is and always will be our top priority. First comes our autopilot safety features that are always active in every Tesla, whether you're an FSD or not. The goal is to prevent crashes, but if the worst occurs, you'll be protected by the best passive safety cars on the planet. Then Doge Army General said my buddy and his teen daughter were hit by a drunk driver head on and they both walked away completely unharmed. Thank you, Lars. They've already ordered their next Tesla. To which Lars said, wow, so glad everyone is safe. Honestly, warms my heart, truly. When I get customer testimonials like this, I print them out and post them around the office and labs so we remember our motivation: save lives. I also saw this post today from Michael. He said, nightmare scenario, someone ran a red light. I had my 1-year-old daughter in the back and he T-boned them. Crawled into the back seat and pulled my crying baby out. Thank God she seems okay. I was so scared. There's nothing else like Tesla safety. I'm so grateful. You may have seen a bunch of headlines about a Tesla losing over $100,000 from depreciation in just 2 years. Unfortunately, that all stemmed from this post from Kyle Connor. Basically, he bought his Model S Plaid at the peak or the all-time high pricing. We'll call it $141,000. Currently, his trade-in value from Tesla is just over $46,000. As we've talked about before, there were plenty of Tesla sales that were much higher roughly 2 years ago thanks to a lot of supply chain shortages and a supply-demand imbalance, which set up a perfect storm for depreciation for Tesla over the past 2 years, but that's really more of a normalization than something that people need to worry about going forward. The reason this is such a problem is because much of the public now thinks Teslas just don't last very long and they fall apart apart and need new battery packs a few years into ownership. But a majority of the depreciation we're seeing is really just from the new car pricing coming down so far. Don't forget, a Model S Plaid right now is under $90,000. It's literally about $50,000 cheaper for a new vehicle than it was just 2 years ago. Just remember, if it comes up in conversation, a majority of this depreciation should already be in the past, and that was actually caused by supply chain anomalies. Tesla is much closer now to the lower bound range of its pricing for its current vehicle fleet, so the depreciation for the next 2 years should be significantly less. And the joker, or the wild card, will always be FSD. Dana Chandler shared a video that should serve as a good video reminder to stay vigilant with FSD.
Deer, 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 deer. Oh boy, move it.
If you watch it back slowly, you can see FSD really didn't start to brake at all. It wasn't until she intervened where you can see the speed go down. She did say she thought FSD was going to slow down, but at least based on the video, I'm not so sure. China is now telling automakers to halt big investment in European countries that support extra tariffs on Chinese-built EVs. This as those new European Union tariffs up to 45.3% went into effect today. 10 EU members, including France, Poland, and Italy, supported tariffs in a vote this month. 5 members, including Germany, opposed them, and 12 abstained. At least a few of the automakers that were talked to, BYD, SAIC, and Geely. Additionally, several foreign automakers also attended the meeting, where the participants were told to be prudent about their investments in countries that abstained from voting and were encouraged to invest in those that voted against the tariffs. Thus, only countries that voted against have green lights for these Chinese and some foreign automakers to continue with big investments in their countries. The only countries that we have that have been made public of those 5 are Germany and Hungary. The rest are not public. As a reminder, Tesla's new tariff rate is 7.8%, the lowest one, but that is in addition to the previous 10% tariff, whereas BYD's new tariff rate for the European market is 17%. The EU is, however, deciding to send officials to Beijing to hold more talks aimed at finding an alternative to these tariffs. So there may be some momentum in these negotiations, but nothing yet. Jeremy Boring, the co-founder of the Daily Wire, had an interesting take on FSD. He said, if you haven't been behind the wheel of a Tesla with FSD, you may not be aware that the world has completely changed. If you have a child under 5, there's a strong chance they will never learn to drive. He said, unless government smothers this project, the future will not involve human drivers, and the change will happen much, much faster than most people imagine. Tesla drivers will simply not be driving at all 36 months from now. Which, yes, is a controversial statement, but he said on the regulatory front, Elon has concluded that the next 3 to 4 years will be the most important of his life from a regulatory point of view. The future of humanity genuinely hangs in the balance, not in the sense that humans will cease to exist if bad policy wins the day, but that the kind of life humans are allowed to live will be fundamentally impacted. Talking about his missions like free speech, landing people on Mars, autonomous vehicles, AI and robotics, and the list goes on. In the past, Elon has said government agencies absolutely have a place for regulations. He's called for regulations for AI and specific things. But as we know, he's also been very vocal about there being far too many regulations in certain areas, and that serious reform is desperately needed. It's probably the least exciting thing we'll talk about on the channel, but the point I really wanted to make was that the regulatory environment and how that plays out over the next 4 years really is going to shape the speed at which Tesla and the rest of Elon's companies can actually accomplish their missions. It's time for us to check in on the Tesla Semi factory, and we can do that thanks to Heinrich Zane.
They are lifting an in-process delivery of insulation for the roof as I anticipated based on Giga Texas. This will cover that corrugated metal panels. I then anticipate a Hypalon type waterproof membrane over that insulation. Not on the truck, but those rolls to the left and to the right of that crane could be those Hypalon rolls that they're going to lift up after they lift and move all of this insulation.
We got the October report from the California New Car Dealers Association. Thus, for California, the BEV market share was 22.2% during the first 9 months of 2024, up slightly from last year. But looking at the quarterly chart for that data, you can see this recent uptrend over the past 3 quarters. Looking at the other powertrain types year to date, gasoline at 58.3%, hybrid at 13.8%, and then plug-in hybrid down at 3.4%. The United States as a whole year to date has seen BEV market share of 7.9%, and California has actually made up 32.1% of all United States fully electric registrations so far year to date. Looking at the table on the left, year to date registrations in California, Tesla's at 159,600 compared to last year when they were over 182,600 by the same time. So year to date, they're down 12.6%, but remember we had the Model 3 changeover earlier this year that really slowed things down. As we've said many times in the past, when you look at only the EV market share, Tesla's share will only go down as other automakers enter the market. It's just math. And impressively, in California, Tesla still maintains a 54.5% share of the EV market. Looking at the top 15 best-selling BEV and plug-in hybrid models, the Model Y really is in a league of its own, with over 105,600 registrations, followed by the Model 3 with over 37,200. Then, if you add up places 3 through 14 on this list, they still fall combined about 20,000 units short of the Model Y. Looking at the top selling vehicles by segment, which considers all powertrain types, the Model Y far and away in first place, with over 55,000 more registrations than the second place vehicle, the Toyota RAV4. For passenger cars, the Model 3 is in third place, closely behind the Honda Civic and the Toyota Camry. It's always good to take a look at California as it serves as the bellwether for EV adoption across the country, but this data is year to date through September, and we already had that with the Q3 results. Alright, so I'm going to lay out some facts about an industry, and I want to see if you guys can guess what it is. The TAM is expected to reach over $407 billion by 2028, and it's growing at a CAGR of over 8%. There are roughly 4,000 companies in this industry around the world, and over 1,400 popular brands sell directly to this industry. But over 3 billion pieces of personal information, including names, addresses, and social security numbers, was stolen from this industry. Everyone that said the data broker industry is correct. So, if you'd like to protect yourself and your family from this rapidly growing industry, the best and easiest way to do that is signing up for Delete Me, the sponsor of this video, as soon as possible. Delete Me is an American company. They've been around for over a decade, and they've been one of the pioneers in the personal data removal industry. They do all of the insane legwork of contacting the thousands of data brokers, ensuring your personal data is removed from the internet. They continually monitor so as new data brokers pop up, you can rest assured your data stays off the internet and it's not being sold around the world. I actually just got my new report this month. During that time, Delete Me reviewed over 5,700 listings and removed 25 that had my personal information. The work that they did likely saved me over 74 hours of time. And in the report, they show you the status of every single data broker, whether your removal is in progress or it's clean and your next scan is in 60 days. So if you'd like to support a great US company, the channel, and take your privacy back for you and your family, you can get 20% off at joindeleteme.com/electrified using my promo code electrified, and the link is below. Or if it's easier, you can use my QR code right on the screen. As Joe Tetmeyer shared, the Boring Company crews have completed installing the tunnel road surface panels and are now preparing the west exit area for the final facing structures and driveways. The tunnel does have a name. Tesla is calling it Cybertunnel, and it's expected to connect the Cybertruck end-of-line production area to the staging lot on the other side of the state highway. I'd be surprised if the tunnel wasn't used for other models as well, and the hope is that these models can eventually drive autonomously from production to the staging lot, which should of course make the logistics operations at Giga Texas even more efficient. I've said many times before, I don't think comparing Tesla to BYD is that wise of a thing, but the media and many others still love to do it anyway. For what it's worth, BYD's quarterly revenue did surpass Tesla for the first time, coming in at $28.2 billion for quarter 3. But what they don't put in the headline is that even though Tesla had $3 billion less when it comes to total revenue, they still made $600 more from a net income perspective than BYD in the quarter. Part of the reason I don't love this comparison is because, as we know, BYD is still selling about 50% of its vehicles that are plug-in hybrid. So BYD's EV-only sales were 443,400 in the quarter. Roughly 19,000 less fully electric vehicles sold than Tesla. Perhaps the most glaring difference in why Tesla deserves such a higher valuation is because BYD's fleet is not going to be capable of flipping a switch and turning on autonomy for all of those vehicles. As of late, BYD has been making a push to do more with autonomy and advanced driving features, but largely to date they've been criticized for lacking in that arena. If you've been around the channel for a while, you may remember April of last year, a BYD spokesman literally said, "We think self-driving tech that's fully separated from humans is very, very far away, and basically impossible." In fairness, as of earlier this year, BYD did commit to investing $14 billion to develop some autonomous driving systems, and the word is they have about 5,000 employees whose focus is on doing just that. But again, focusing on BYD's existing fleet, things were not so great as the Euro NCAP had slammed BYD's advanced driving tech. The safety experts rated 5 new cars, with the BYD Atto 3 at the bottom of the pile. The BYD Atto 3's intelligent adaptive cruise control was not recommended, and the Euro NCAP found the tech failed to interpret road signs correctly. And even going forward, BYD is going to be heavily reliant on third-party players to help them with their autonomy, where they're not really doing much in-house. Waymo said it's now providing over 150,000 paid trips and driving over 1 million fully autonomous miles every week. To put that into context for you, back in May of this year, Waymo reported offering 50,000 paid rides per week. Then about 4 months later in September, they announced 100,000 paid rides per week. And then from September to October, so just 1 month, that jumped another 50,000 paid rides per week to the 150,000 number we just saw. Said another way, from May to October of this year, Waymo tripled its weekly paid rides. Piggybacking on the VW nightmare from yesterday, they have now reported a 42% drop in operating profit in the third quarter. Vehicle sales fell 8.3% year over year. VW said the results year to date were impacted by higher fixed costs and restructuring efforts. A VW spokesperson said, "Ahead of the negotiations today, we need to state the situation is getting more serious." Those negotiations, of course, about the upcoming new labor agreements. And it keeps going. VW is now asking its workers to take a 10% pay cut as of today, arguing it was the only way Europe's biggest car maker could save jobs and remain competitive, as profits plunged to a 3-year low and union bosses threatened strikes. At the same time, worker representatives came into these negotiations demanding a 7% pay raise and threatened those strikes starting in December unless the company definitively ruled out plant closures, which, as we saw yesterday, may not happen. But rest assured, VW's finance chief said there's a comeback plan for China that includes spruced up software and driving assistance, expecting to regain market share in 2026 or 2027. The European car market has shrunk by about 2 million vehicles since the pandemic, which is important to keep in mind even for Tesla sales, resulting in about 500,000 fewer unit sales for VW every year. Cheaper models from Tesla and Chinese car makers have gained market share in Europe. We know overall Tesla sales in Europe are down year over year, but this is talking about since the pandemic. The VW finance chief said, "We have not forgotten how to build great great cars, but our production costs are far from competitive. We should really use our time to increase our competitiveness on German plants. VW woke up today and the nightmare is still on. The National Automobile Dealers Association plans to leave no stone unturned as they push back against Scout Motors' decision to bypass the dealers. A managing partner at a law firm that does a lot in the dealer industry said its corporate structure and formal attachment to VW Group could be a challenge in its quest to sell direct to consumer. The CEO of NADA declined to share details about the association's strategy to block Scout from direct sales, but bluntly said everything is on the table right now. The association is prepared to challenge Scout in courthouses and state houses across the country. It sounds like this is going to boil down to how the courts interpret the legal structure of Scout Motors and its relation to VW. Either way though, this is likely to be a new battle for Scout and VW for the next 6 months plus. Zoox is finally planning to roll out dozens of purpose-built autonomous vehicles in San Francisco and Las Vegas in the coming weeks. Their CTO said Zoox will start offering rides starting with employees in the Soma, south of Market neighborhood of San Francisco. He also said these initial geofences will expand several-fold over the next year. And then, 2026 is when we're going to really start cranking out production vehicles at very large scale. Zoox will launch an Explorer program of early riders who will be able to use the robotaxis for free before opening the service to paying customers. These Explorers will gain access to the Zoox vehicles early next year, starting with Las Vegas. The vehicles will operate throughout the most busy 16 hours of the day. Zoox is working with many of the resort hotels up and down the strip to pick up and drop off passengers at the entrances. He said, "We're not ready to share which hotels those are, but we're not going to just be driving up and down the strip." Zoox is still using suppliers for most of its parts, and then they assemble their vehicles in Fremont and Hayward. And finally, he said, "We have the facilities to produce tens of thousands of our own robotaxis." But that same CTO, Jesse Levinson, had some shots fired right in Tesla's direction. He said he does not believe Tesla will launch a robotaxi ride-hailing service in California or anywhere else next year. The fundamental issue is they don't have technology that works. And by works, I want to differentiate between a driver assistance system that drives most of the time, except when it doesn't, and then you have to take over, versus a system that's so reliable and robust you don't need a person in it. He continued, "Our perspective is you really do need significantly more hardware than Tesla is putting in their vehicles to build a robotaxi that's not just as safe, but especially safer than a human." He did say he uses Tesla's FSD every couple of weeks. He called it impressive, but also stressful. He also said FSD is about 100 times less safe than a human if you look at all the metrics that are publicly available. I could launch into a rant about Tesla's safety data, the report they just put out a few weeks back, but the unfortunate truth is we really don't know for sure if FSD is included in that autopilot safety data or not. For some context, back in 2019, Jesse Levinson said that Tesla had no chance to fully develop autonomous driving tech in 2020. At the time, he basically said the same thing, that Tesla's cars don't have enough sensors or computers to achieve FSD. Looking back, we can say he was right about the latter. Tesla definitely did not have enough compute. But as we're well aware, the situation has definitely changed. Don't forget, Zoox was burning through cash at an alarming rate. The company was spending more than $30 million every month in early 2020 and projected it would run out of cash by July of that year. Then, according to court testimony, Zoox was on the cusp of liquidation when the Amazon acquisition deal came through. In 2018, Zoox was valued at around $3.2 billion, but when it was acquired by Amazon in 2020, Amazon only paid $1.3 billion. So clearly things were trending in the wrong direction. And with serendipitous timing, Elon chimed in on Sawyer's post saying if he hadn't gotten bailed out by Amazon, his company would be dead already. Just so you know, there are actual studies being done trying to determine the most optimal location for new public charging stations. I'll have this below if you're interested, but the takeaway is that Tesla has had the first come, first serve, best pick of the litter, if you will, when it comes to those locations. For over a decade now, they've been hand-picking the most convenient and highest traffic areas. A huge advantage that I think most of the general public has no idea about. Tesla stock closed the day at $250 $57.55, down 0.76%, while the Nasdaq was down 0.56%. It was a low volume day, trading about 30 million shares below the average volume the past 30 days. Don't forget, if you're interested, check out Delete Me linked below. Grab that 20% off if you want to take your privacy back for you and your family. Also, there will likely be no video from me tomorrow on Thursday as we have some family visiting. Hope you guys have a wonderful day. Please like the video if you did. You can find me on X linked below, and a huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters.